This time we're going to do something, we're going to do a piece by someone, by a composer that I guess is my favorite, which would be Brahms. So when I play, or when I took lessons and was learning how to play, you play a lot of people, you play a lot of composers, new, old, whatever. And of course you have your favorites. I have to say that Brahms was the one composer that unlike others that I played, Mozart, Beethoven, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, Scriabin, Bartok, etc. Brahms was the one person I played that I immediately felt at home. Not that I was necessarily good enough to play it all. It can be exceedingly difficult, like a lot of composers can be. But yet, even with the difficulty, I felt like I knew what was going on somehow. Unlike other composers where I sort of felt on the outside, but Brahms is the one person I really felt at home with, like I was sort of inside the music rather than on the outside looking in kind of a sense to it. So that's why I've always felt very much at home playing Brahms, even if I can't play him, at speed or at all, because it's too difficult technically. I do really feel at home with the music for whatever reason. It's just personal preference. But so it is one of my favorites. So I'm going to do a piece by him today. So Brahms, not going to go into him in terms of who he was right now, but Brahms was a composer in the 19th century, lived in the 19th century from 1830 something to almost the end of the 19th century. Died just before the 20th century started. So he composed a lot of solo piano music, but not necessarily continuously like some composers, such as some of the earlier classical composers did. He composed a big chunk when he was really young. He started out young. He was very much a talented musical genius, and it showed that at a young age. He composed a chunk of music before the age of 23 for solo piano. You're forgetting for a second all of the music he composed in total, but just talking about solo piano music. He composed a chunk before the age of 23, including, I think, 3 sonatas, variations on a theme by Robert Schumann, and then one Paganini, the violinist. And then what I'm going to play today, which is an opus 10, which was a collection of 4 ballades. And it's a chunk of music, and it's significant music all by itself, before he even hits 23 years old, it's published. And then he stops, and then he doesn't compose anything for a while. In fact, almost to the point where he was just short of dying. He was really toward the end of his life. He really started composing for solo piano again. So it's sort of a very big gap between the two. Not that he didn't play the piano and use it. He used it with other instruments, but just for solo piano, he really didn't come back to until he was much, much older. So the ones we're going to do today, like I said, the one I'm going to do a piece is one of the 4 ballades. And it is one of the pieces from his youth. So it exhibits a certain innocence, a certain energy, exuberance of a young person in that sense. So one thing to take note of, we'll just take note of what it's about. This is a series of 4 ballades. The first one was actually specifically designated by Brahms as being after a literary influence, which was the first one was written in inspiration of a Scottish poem, Edward, which is a grisly little tale. But he explicitly said this was something that was associated with it. The other 3 in the collection, there is no literary reference, though you get a sense that maybe there is. There's a certain epic, mythological, heroic quality to them in some sense. Whether there's a real connection or not, who knows? But he did have a real affection for that kind of, literature, older poems, ballades, literary references in those ways, mythics kinds of things, epic poems. So he had a certain sense for that and the heroic nature of some of those and the like. So you get that to some degree in some of these compositions, especially the earlier ones. But if you just listen to his music in general, you sort of find those kinds of strands in his music all across the board. That being said, so this is plunge into it. This is number 3 in the group. It's a shorter one. It's not very long. It's patterned as you have an A section, you have a first part, first theme, and then you have a middle section, the B section, and then you come back to the A again. So it's an A, B, A form in that sense. And so he repeats, not exactly the same, but he comes back to the same theme later on. To note how this sounds. I mean, you can sort of listen to it a lot of ways. Like I said, I sort of gave you a sense of maybe it's a heroic, epic kind of thing. So you can take it that way. So for me, it was always, the first part is always sort of a very agitated kind of thing in terms of there's something going on, you're an activity, somebody's trying to get somewhere, you have a quest, you have a task to perform, you can't do it. You have that sense of being constantly thrown back and forth in that first A section of the thing where you're trying to get somewhere and you never do, and you're thrown back down again. And so it has that sense of, a quest kind of, out to fight something or to get past some obstacle. And so it starts out in that kind of way. And you have this kind of a figure which keeps repeating itself. So you're doing something and then you're thrown back. So it starts out like this. So you can see you do something, you get thrown back, and the thrown back part I didn't play very well, but that's the sense, right? It keeps sort of repeats that over and over again until finally you get to the end of that A section where you effectively are gone. You're done. You're dead. That's sort of the sense of it. It goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth like some kind of a conflict or a fight or epic battle or something, and then you're just down for the count. And at that point, you get that chord, and as the chord fades away, suddenly things change, and you have this kind of a stark, solemn, quiet space that you suddenly enter, where you have maybe the sounds of angelic choirs and angels and music from heaven, and you have bells ringing in the background. And that's the middle section. And so you have that kind of quiet space, and it doesn't last long. It's sort of very short, but you get that suddenly you're in a different place kind of thing. It's very stark. This is probably the most, he does this a lot actually in a number of his pieces, where you have that kind of, you have an agitated moment, and then you have suddenly everything gets quiet, or at least gets still in some musical sense. And you have almost a church-like feel to it. And then it goes away, and suddenly you're back to the other. So that's true here too. It's very, but in this case, it's almost a very, very, very stark contrast, unlike some of his other pieces, where it isn't quite so abrupt. But this one is very abrupt in that sense. You're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You're down for the count, so to speak, and suddenly you enter into a vision, a church-like state, heaven, some kind of dream. And you have that. And then you come back to the original theme, which was again that kind of back and forth conflict. And it ends in that kind of way where you're still thrown down, thrown back, but yet somehow it ends in a sense that, I'm not gonna give up. I'm gonna sort of carry on with this quest. And it ends on sort of a hopeful note. You haven't achieved your end, so to speak, but you have that hopeful note that I'm gonna get there. Or at least I think I am. And so it sort of has that quality of sort of like a, quest epic poem kind of thing. You're in the battle, you get thrown down, all is lost, you have a vision, the vision sort of, inspires you to go forward and keep trying. And so you do, and you have sort of a hope that you're gonna get there. So that's sort of how you might take the piece. You can obviously take it any way you wanna, but that's one way of looking at it. But hopefully you'll enjoy this rendition. And so now we have Johannes Brahms, from I guess around 1850 or so. This would be the opus 10 collection of ballades. This is number 3.